When I was a kid, I remember playing the original Alone in the Dark that came out in the 90s. And what was so aggravating to me was that was when Windows was kind of starting to take over DOS. And I remember I kept installing the game in DOS, and I couldn't get any sound files because there weren't drivers for that, and you had to actually play it in Windows despite what the box said to do. And I was like 8 years old at the time. I didn't really understand gaming, and it frustrated me. So I played Alone in the Dark multiple times, completely silent, and then multiple times again with audio because I was too stupid to understand how to install it. I am still stupid, but for different reasons now. And finally got around to checking out the new Alone in the Dark demo, which just dropped yesterday. This seems to follow a pretty much remake for the first game, in which you are going into this giant mansion. Definitely a lot of Lovecraftian villains you'll face. And in the original game, you played as one of two people. You played as either this guy named Edward Carnby, who was a private investigator, or you played as Emily Hartwood, which was the niece of this guy, Jeremy, who was basically found dead in his Louisiana mansion called Jersetto. I remember the voice line from the game, because it did have really primitive voice acting back then. The voice actor said, "And he died by his own hand." And I was like, ooh. Now, Alone in the Dark will always hold a special place in my heart because of it being one of the first horror games that I played. And you did die a lot. And there was a lot of jump scares. And there wasn't a lot of combat or anything like that, but there were some very basic puzzles that required you to run around and try to avoid being killed by these horrendous monsters. This game seems to take similar beats from that. Obviously, a very heavy emphasis on a southern lifestyle in terms of architecture and in terms of cadence of the characters. It's going to be this very weird, kind of goofy looking mansion that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. You're going to have these weird rooms that are dedicated to things that you typically probably wouldn't expect them to be. Think along the lines of like a Resident Evil type game where you're just a sprawling mansion that's just bizarre architecture and bizarre decorations and characterizations all around. You're also going to have this emphasis, it looks like this game at least, on getting rid of that fixed camera angle. And I would say, out of playing my recollection of the first game versus what I am seeing here, I miss the fixed camera angle. Because the camera's constantly following over your character's shoulder as you walk around and explore this very limited demo. Kind of get a sense for the environment and basic gameplay mechanics. But you'll notice that when the most tense elements appear in this game, they will kind of rein control of your camera, and they'll pan it down a little bit lower over your character's shoulder. Very tight shot. The way the character opens the door and the way the camera slowly pans around so that you can't necessarily see what the character sees right away. For that reason, I love that they're injecting that tension. I like that. That's very important in a game like this, because there's not going to be much to it in terms of like running around and shooting in combat unless they've radically changed the design. It was always just about in that tense moment of like, what's going to happen next? So the fact that they're constantly kind of forcing the camera down to this tight angle and forcing the view in a certain position, I don't know why they didn't just own it and stick to the original camera angle that they had in the first that was fixed. Because there, they would slowly reveal the interior of a room as you walked around, or you would be exploring a room and only be able to see half of it. And meanwhile, the other half wouldn't be revealed to you. So you were basically walking in blind while your character was reacting to something that you couldn't yet see. That created way more tension, in my opinion, and than what they've kind of done here, where they're kind of giving you this open free reign and then they snap the camera away from you. And it's like, just make up your mind. Do I get to paint the frame of the way that I want to play this game? Or do you want to just take charge? Yeah, it's kind of the differentiation here. In terms of graphics, it looks great. I played everything on what was called cinematic, whatever that means. It was the highest setting I could find. Obviously, it's a demo, so you got to keep in mind that there may be some polish issues and bug issues and performance issues. It ran well. It ran at a lock 60 frames a second. I assume there must have been some sort of VSync that I had enabled. I don't really think it should have. I think it could have run it higher than 60, but that's fine. Ultrawide was supported, but as you saw numerous times with all these cutscenes, the pre-rendered videos are not in ultrawide, and as a result, you do get those black bars on the side. So as I'm playing through this demo, I can't help but notice that this little girl does not seem at all bothered or frightened in the least in what's going on. She's very nonchalant about the fact that, like, oh, look what happened again. Our house got possessed by demons and these flesh-eating bugs, and, you know, she just doesn't seem like she cares too much about it. She seems more just annoyed than anything. And I'm curious if the narrative has changed. Obviously, this being a prequel, you know, we get a little snapshot of, I assume, Jeremy there at the very beginning, right? You know, kind of setting up the prequel. Obviously, it is the prologue. But, you know, looking through that and, you know, looking at how these characters just seem like, oh, whatever. In the original Alone in the Dark game, you're coming into the house after all this has happened. You're trying to uncover why is this like house possessed by demons and what the hell is going on around here. And your character definitely is not that relaxed about it. They're constantly in fear. They're constantly petrified of what's happening. So I'm curious to also if that's going to be a tonal shift in this game. If it's like, oh, look what we got into again. We opened a portal to hell. Darn it, gonna have to fix that and close that up, you know, get back to lunch or whatever. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But despite that kind of nonsensical narrative that was playing through here, I am definitely intrigued. I'm definitely excited for a game like this. I love these types of slower paced exploration games where it's not constant run and gun, constantly being shot at. In this game, to survive, you're going to have to do things quickly to, like, barricade a door or run into another room. You only have a couple seconds to explore before you have to move on to the next area. And it's going to force you to kind of play at a, you know, you're going to play in fear. And I like that. This is a horror game, right? That's what it should be. It should be a horror game. You should feel scared. You should feel like something bad is about to happen at any corner to you. And it's not going to have a reliance, I hope, on weaponry or combat or guns or whatever. I don't want this to be just like a Resident Evil 4 game. I want this to be more of a slow-paced exploration game. So I'm excited for that. Remains to be seen. The demo was insanely light. You just saw the whole thing. I talked over the entire thing, all like 6 minutes of it. You get a little bit of a cutscene here where they introduce the characters that you'll be playing with in the regular game. Emily Hartwood, just like in the original, that's her holding the letter from her uncle, and then also Edward Carnby, the private investigator. Obviously, this time they're gonna lean a little bit more on Hollywood than the unknown characters that were in the first one, the really bad voice acting in the first one. So I'm hopeful that these characters can deliver a good performance and really sell that terror and fear. And I think if they can, then this is going to be a great game. If they can't, and it's kind of just more dialed in, then obviously we're going to have problems. Remains to be seen. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.